Some empires collapse loudly, others leave a hole. We are comfortable with endings that feel dramatic. Walls breached, armies broken, kings dragging destiny down with them. But Nabatea, the kingdom that carved temples into sandstone ribs and made the desert profitable, simply went quiet. No final war, no ritual suicide, no cultural implosion, just absorption, a vanishing act. We walk through Petra today, not as archaeologists, but as tourists who sense a presence that never learned how to introduce itself. The facades glow at sunrise. The treasury stands like a cathedral awaiting worshippers who will never arrive. We marvel at the architecture, yet struggle to imagine the architects. It is unsettling to stand in front of a civilization that conquered climate, mastered trade, engineered water, and still lost history. Which leads to the deeper question: how does a society that solves survival lose the right to be remembered? Water, the first empire. Imagine a kingdom whose greatest weapon was not iron, but rainfall. The Nabateans turned the desert into a treasury by hiding water in the rock. They carved cisterns into impossible cliffs, catching storms like merchants catching opportunity. Every drop was shepherded, stored, rationed, protected. If Rome's greatness was military discipline, Nabatea's was hydrological patience. Their cities, Petra, Hegra, Avdat, were experiments in drought-resistant civilization. The desert tried to kill them. They turned it into a gatekeeper, and because they never wasted nature, nature rewarded them. Caravans came not for scenery, but for certainty. The Nabateans made routes predictable, water reliable, shelter negotiable. Trade became an inevitability. Frankincense from Arabia, bitumen from the Dead Sea, spices from India, silk from China. You do not need a navy when you own the only road. And for a few centuries, Nabatea owned it. But ownership is temporary. Roads change. Seas offer shortcuts. Empires rewrite geography. If your advantage depends on a single terrain, what happens when the terrain is bypassed? Rome arrives quietly. We imagine empire building as conflict, legions, banners, dust. But Nabatea's annexation by Rome in 106 CE looked more like a transaction. No decisive battle, no heroic refusal, no cultural defiance. Rome wanted stability. Nabatea specialized in stability. Their interests aligned. The desert kingdom was folded into an imperial spreadsheet and marked as acquired, which leaves a strange psychological wound. What happens when your greatest strength, flexibility, becomes the reason you do not resist absorption? Nabatea survived by avoiding confrontation. They bought safety with cooperation. They embraced diplomacy as armor. It worked, until cooperation erased them. A civilization can negotiate itself into irrelevance. The trade route betrayal. In the ancient world, relevance was geographic. Whoever controlled bottlenecks controlled destiny. Nabatea's genius was in exploiting slowness. Land caravans could not race through desert without help. But technology is a settling of scores. Sea routes expanded. Shipbuilding improved. The Indian Ocean network began to dwarf inland trade. Once, incense crawled by camel. Now, it sailed efficiently, bypassing Nabatean tolls entirely. You could survive in the desert for centuries, until the ocean rendered your value obsolete. This is not a failure. It is a reminder. A society collapses not when it is weak, but when the world no longer requires what it offers. Nabatea didn't miscalculate. The planet rerouted around them. A kingdom without a myth. Petra is famous, yet the Nabateans remain anonymous. Why? Because they never mythologized themselves. Egypt left hieroglyphs. Greece left philosophy. Rome left law. China left bureaucracy. Nabatea left architecture without narrative. Their inscriptions were functional. Their art was ceremonial. Their records were sparse. Their identity never hardened into cultural story. They believed that stone was memory, but stone without words is scenery. It raises a question many modern cultures avoid. Is achievement enough if you never explain yourself? A civilization without self-definition becomes a civilization defined by outsiders, or forgotten entirely. The comfort trap. We associate collapse with suffering. But Nabatea's ending was a symptom of comfort. They were wealthy, diplomatic, geographically protected, and commercially essential. They solved scarcity. They enjoyed peace. They managed risk. They built quietly. But comfort sedates purpose. When existence becomes easy, meaning becomes negotiable. When prosperity is stable, threat perception disappears. When the environment stops attacking you, identity stops hardening. Nabatea's warning is subtle. Comfort erodes narrative. If a civilization's purpose is merely to continue, it will eventually lose the reason to continue. The architecture of disappearing. Stand before Petra's treasury. Notice its perfection. Hellenistic influence, Nabatean adaptation, Roman taste. It is hybrid architecture, cultural blending turned into stone. But hybridization, while adaptive, hides ownership. Who were the Nabateans culturally? Arab traders, Aramaic scribes, desert pragmatists. Their identity was fluid, until fluidity dissolved into absorption. They merged so well with Rome that within 2 centuries, language shifted, writing shifted, aesthetics shifted. Adaptation saved their bodies. Adaptation erased their memory, which raises a more uncomfortable thought. Is over-adaptation a form of slow suicide? A civilization without enemies. History remembers conflict. Opposition creates narrative tension. Athens versus Sparta, Rome versus Carthage, Persia versus Greece, Ming versus Mongols. Nabatea had no arch-enemy. They negotiated instead of provoking. They paid instead of resisting. They offered passage instead of taxes whenever threat increased. Their strategy was not to win, but to avoid losing. And avoidance works, until history selects for protagonists. A civilization without confrontation becomes a civilization without story. Diplomacy kept Nabatea safe. It also kept them forgettable. Language without echo. There was once a Nabatean script, an ancestor of Arabic calligraphy. But what good is a script without a literary ego? They recorded transactions, not philosophies. Commerce, not cosmology. Price, not meaning. The result? Their language evolved into others while their voice disappeared. Linguistic influence earns gratitude. Linguistic silence earns anonymity. Civilizations that do not assert vocabulary lose authorship. Success without necessity. The greatest psychological threat to a civilization is not invasion, it is redundancy. When the Romans absorbed Nabatea, they kept Petra functioning. Trade continued. Water flowed, engineering held, urban life persisted. But the Nabateans were no longer needed to maintain it. First, you lose your economic necessity, then cultural leverage, then political autonomy, then narrative, then identity. What remains is geology. Petra endured. Nabatea didn't. The hidden parallel. Why does this ancient silence feel modern? Because we live in an era where the world reroutes overnight. Global economics rewrites relevance. Technology devalues geography. AI erodes professional identity. Automation undermines labor. Outsourcing dissolves local necessity. Every stable industry can be replaced by a faster route. Every cultural niche can be assimilated. Every identity can weaken without a narrative anchor. The question haunting Petra is the same question haunting the 21st century. What keeps a civilization necessary? Because survival is not enough. Continuity is not purpose. Existence is not meaning. The human parable. Strip away archaeology. Nabatea is not merely history, it is psychology. How many individuals negotiate themselves into invisibility? How many groups survive without articulating why they matter? How many societies trade identity for efficiency? Nabatea teaches that relevance is earned daily. Memory must be protected. Purpose must be argued. not violently, but intentionally. The silent risk is not death, but absorption. The single warning. So why did Nabatea fade? Not because they failed, but because the world evolved past their role. Not because they were conquered, but because they chose convenience over identity. Not because they collapsed, but because they allowed others to narrate them. Their lesson is one sentence long. If you do not fight to define yourself, the world defines you out of existence. Petra is stunning because its stone refuses erosion. But a civilization is not stone. It is story, identity, meaning, narrative, necessity. And when those dissolve, you leave behind an exquisite cavity, beauty without voice, endurance without authorship, memory without a narrator. Nabatea did not die, they were simply replaced, which leads to the final, unsettling reflection. The danger is not losing the battle. The danger is losing the script. Civilizations do not vanish when they are destroyed. They vanish when they stop insisting, "We matter tomorrow." Join us on a journey through the ages where every question becomes an opportunity to discover. Subscribe Timeless Questions channel now and start exploring life's greatest questions with us.